Chairete. This is Abbey Greek. Biblion ta prῶτον, chapter alpha. This is part 2 of chapter alpha. The first part covered the history of the Greek alphabeta and the alphabeta itself. Part 2 will cover the alphabeta, and then we will go over the pronunciation and accentuation of classical Greek. First, let's begin by reviewing the alphabeta. Go ahead and think of your little song. If you don't have your own little song, you can use this one. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, iota, kappa, lambda, mu, nu, xi, omicron, pi, rho, sigma, tau, upsilon, phi, chi, psi, omega. So that stupid little song could help you. You could also make up your own stupid little song. But we have alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, iota, kappa, lambda, mu, nu, xi, omicron, pi, rho, sigma, tau, upsilon, phi, chi, psi, omega. So we went over the pronunciation of the letters in part 1. Alpha is like A, beta is be, gamma is g, delta is d, epsilon is a short e, zeta is like sd, zd, eta is the long e, epsilon, simple e, eta, that's the long e. Theta, it's like tau, but with an aspirate, so ta, theta. Iota, it's an I, e, long sounds like e. Kappa, like a k. Lambda, l, mu, m, nu, n. Xi, that's ks, it's a kappa and sigma. Xa, xa, xa. You have to practice that one a few times probably. It's especially fun when it is the first letter of a word, like xenos. Omicron, little o, omicron, little o, it's the o, just an o sound, simple. Pi, probably familiar through math. Pi, pu, no aspirate on the pu there. If you add an aspirate to pi, it becomes pi, pi. Here's rho, rho, this is the trilled R. When you add a tail, it becomes the R that you probably recognize through the Latin alphabet. Sigma, here's sigma, the capital. There's the initial and medial form, and here's the final form. So when sigma is the last letter of a word, it looks like this. Tau, tau is pure T, no aspirate. So that would be theta if it has an aspirate, tau, no aspirate. Upsilon, it's an oo sound, oo. Pi, as said before, is pi aspirated. Chi is kappa aspirated, so ka, ka. Psi is ps, a combination of pi and sigma. And then omega is the long form of omicron, where you have one omicron and another omicron. We've just lost the top part of it, and that is the little omega, big O. So it's O as opposed to O. All right, let's talk about the script. What does it look like when it's written? Well, in classical Greek, like classical Latin, they wrote in majuscule, no spaces between words, because we have to conserve expensive writing media. So at the top here is an ostrakon. An ostrakon is a potsherd. Potsherds were the scrap paper of the Greek world, because pots, they break, and then their shards, little scraps are all over the place, so they use those shards as sort of recycled scrap paper. An ostrakon, potsherd, during an ostracism in classical Athens, where you would The person who gets the most votes gets to lead the city for 10 years. Yay, big prize. So the citizens would gather together and they would write the name of the person they wanted to be banished, to be ostracized, on an ostracon, hence the term. So we can see me, g, that's a gamma. A, that's an alpha. Mega, kappa, lambda, megaclis, H, there's actually a H there. It looks pretty much like an H instead of the aspirate mark. Hippokratos. Megacles Hippokratos. So apparently this guy needed to be kicked out of the city for 10 years. Below is a much, much later, so we're talking, I think this is the 14th century AD manuscript of the Iliad. So this is the opening line of the Iliad. You can see the huge mu. Me, that's an eta. Menin aede tea theta epsilon alpha. This is a cursive pi. Pe le I geo Achilleos. Sing, goddess, the wrath of Peleus' son, Achilles. And unlike the ancient Romans, the Greeks actually did have a few punctuation marks. If you see what looks like a semicolon, that stands in for a question mark. You see a sort of, ignore this dot down here, it's this one right here. If you see a dot kind of like this way, between unlike and the, that's a period. The Greeks use that as a period, putting a dot in between sentences. So these accents, over which you may fret so much, were allegedly invented by Aristophanes of Byzantium in the 3rd century BC. This was to aid barbarians, i.e. non-Greeks, people who spoke bar, and they meant Persians. Persian doesn't really sound like that, so something about the Greeks. Anyway, barbarian means non-Greek. If it's a Greek thinking it, speaking it, saying it, so that means me, and that probably means you as well. So the accents are there to help us, poor non-Greek speakers, how to read proper Greek. Accents are actually not common in many manuscripts before the 7th century AD. So imagine all those misspellings. All right, some quirks of pronunciation. We went over some of this a little bit in part 1, but review is good. So what about that H? You will not ordinarily encounter the letter H in Greek. But it's right there. Be quiet, you. So, to indicate aspiration, or a lack of aspiration, that is, spiro, breathing in Latin, spiro. The Greeks used this mark, looks like a backwards apostrophe, as a rough breathing. That's the rough aspiration. That's the H sound. So it comes from eta, capital Eta, which looks like the H, and I just chop the first part off. And that is the rough breathing. Then the smooth breathing is this mark. And that comes from no aspiration, no H. All right, these marks only appear over initial vowels. So initial vowels, the first vowel of a word. If a word begins with a vowel, the vowel must either have this to indicate a rough breathing, or this guy to indicate a smooth breathing. So for example, hexagon, there's definitely a sound accompanying that epsilon. So that initial vowel, that initial epsilon, there's that aspirate sound, hexagonon. Versus, check out this guy, over the initial O in oligarchia, oligarchy. There is no, it's not oligarchia, it's oligarchia. If the initial vowel is capitalized, then the breathing is typically written first, that is to the left of the vowel. So if we have the capital name Alexandros, we have smooth breathing, no H. If the word begins with a diphthong, that means two vowels said as one, they're written together, then the breathing is written not to the left of the capital first initial vowel, but it's written over the second little vowel. So the Greek goddess of childbirth, Eletheia, that's going to be, there's no H there, it needs the smooth breathing, but because the initial vowel sound is a diphthong in epsilon iota, A, then we typically write the smooth breathing mark over the iota, over the second vowel in the diphthong. Initial rho and upsilon always have the rough breathing. So if we have a word like rhetoric, rhetorike, we have the r. That is initial rho has the aspirate, rhetorike. And initial upsilon also has the rough breathing. So the Greek word for sun is huios, always with the hui. Initial upsilon must have the rough breathing. Gamma does some funny things. When gamma works with gamma, kappa, xi, or chi, then it's pronounced like N. So this is not aggelos, but angelos. We get, it's the Greek word for messenger, it is where we get the word angel. Angels are messengers. Angelos. Then we have ancura, where we have like an N, ancura, means anchor. Larynx, not larynx, It's a little bit easier to pronounce, larynx. It's our larynx. And axurinkos, inkos. Double consonants, that would be zeta, xi, and phi, and psi, not phi. Those are double consonants, the combination of two consonant sounds into one. So we have zeta, we have xi, and psi, not phi, psi. Aspirated consonants are theta, phi, and chi. Those are the aspirated consonants, where theta is tau plus the aspirate, so theta. Phi is pi plus the aspirate, phi, and kappa plus the aspirate is chi. Vowels are either long, which is indicated by macron, which is the Greek word for big, or they are short, which is sometimes, very rarely do we indicate short vowels, we just sort of leave them be. Sometimes it will be indicated by a breve, which is the Latin word for short. Why not just throw some Latin in there? More often, short vowels left unmarked. A long vowel takes twice as long to pronounce as a short vowel. So epsilon and omicron are short by themselves. So we have epsilon, little guy, as opposed to eta, the counterpart, that is long. So eta equals 2 epsilons. So so that's o, Alpha, iota, and upsilon can either be long or short, and if it really matters, they will be marked accordingly with a macron. So short a, long a, I, u. Diphthongs being the combination of two vowel sounds into one, we have I, a, oi, ui, ow, o, and oo. We go through that one more time. I, a, oi, ui, ow, o, oo. Now, iota does some funny things. We have an iota subscript and iota adscript. And if you know your Latin, subscript means written underneath and adscript means written next to. So when an iota follows a long alpha, eta, or omega, we typically do not write the iota alongside the long vowel. That would be an adscript, but typically beneath it, the subscript. So this diphthong right here, alpha, if this alpha were long, then we would typically not write the iota after it like this, but instead like this, where we have the alpha and then the iota is written like a little itty bitty guy, subscript written underneath. Same thing with the eta, and same thing with the omega. Now, you can see epsilon and omicron are fine, as well as short alpha. Now, if the vowel is capitalized for some reason, is the first line or sentence or whatnot, then the iota will be written as an adscript. You can see the example there. All right, syllabification. We're getting into the good stuff. So syllabification, marking the syllables. A Greek word has as many syllables as it has vowels or diphthongs. So a consonant iota is not a vowel. So think of the word iota itself. Iota, iota. It's not iota, iota. It's not 3 syllables. It's 2. Iota, iota. 2 syllables. The Greek word for doctor, iatros, iatros, iatros. So it's ya and tros, 2 syllables, not 3. So oligarchia, oligarchia. So o, li, gar, ki, a. Oligarchia. E, le, thui, a. Elethria. Pi, deu, te, sois, ton. Pi, deus, te, sois, ton. So some of these words, they get a little bit lengthy. Greeks like their itty-bitty little words that are just one letter, and they also love their really, really long words. Pi, deu, te, sois, ton. You'll find that there are few sounds that the Greeks did not like. So the last syllable, this is a review, you should remember this from Latin. The last syllable of a word is called the ultima. The next to last syllable is the penult, and the third to last is called the antepenult, and that will become important with the accents. A syllable which contains a long vowel or diphthong, so a long vowel, that's going to be an eta and an omega always. The other vowels will be marked long with a macron. Diphthong, that's long by nature, so those are always by their nature long. A syllable whose vowel is followed by 2 or more consonants, a double consonant or an aspirated consonant, is considered long by position. So even an epsilon can be considered long if it's followed by 2 or more consonants, a double consonant, or an aspirated consonant. That is considered long by position. And it works long mostly in scansion and poetry. You don't have to worry about that too much now. All right, here we go. Gird your loins. So accents. The ancient Greek accent, classical Greek accent, it's one of pitch or tone. And they got that from Proto-Indo-European, which also appears to be in pitch or tone. This means that an accented syllable has a higher pitch than an unaccented syllable, and thus it creates a sort of musical cadence when speaking. This is opposed to classical Latin, English, and modern Greek. That's a stress accent. We speak with stress accents, where we have an accented syllable, not syllable. See, if you put the accent on the wrong syllable, the emphasis sounds weird. So on a stress accent, we put more force on the accented syllable. Now, a Greek word's accent is to be learned as an integral important part of that word's correct spelling. So don't think, yeah, I'm just going to ignore these accents. Do not do that. Do not do that. Aristophanes of Byzantium labored for however long he did to make these three little accents for you, barbarian speaker. Let's use them. So the accents are three in number. They are the acute, so it is this guy, an uptick, indicates a rising pitch. I've heard around a musical fifth. Good luck figuring that out. Circumflex is a combination of the acute, it goes whoop up, but then it goes doop down, back to monotone. And grave indicates the monotone. No raising of pitch. So we have the acute, the doop, the sharp up, the circumflex, the circleflex, and then the grave. Alrighty. Here are some rules of how the classical Greek accent works. I'm just going to throw these rules at you, read them through a few times, refer back to this video if you need to, especially when we start declining nouns. When we start declining nouns, you're going to see these accents in the wild in their natural habitat. It will be helpful for you to observe them very carefully, very closely in the wild, and then after you've done so, come back, look at these rules. Read the rules, understand the rules, and then go back to the noun in the wild, watch how it does. So, the acute accent may stand on any of the last three syllables of a word, be them long or short. So the acute can stand on the ultima, can stand on the penult, it can stand on the antepenult. And mind you, not every word has to have an antepenult or a penult. The circumflex may stand on only a long penult or a long ultima. So the acute can go on all three. The circumflex can only go on the penult or the ultima. The grave may only stand on the ultima, be that ultima long or short, and we call that baritone. So baritone, which is Greek for deep tone. All right, so if an acute accent falls upon the antepenult, we call that proparoxytone, proparoxytone, and we can say that the word is proparoxytonic. If an acute falls upon the penult, that is called paroxytone, and we may say that that word is paroxytonic. If an acute falls upon the ultima, that word is called oxytone, and we may say that that word is oxytonic. Very good. Now, you note that we start with oxytone, add par for the penult, and then propar for the antepenult. So that's how I remember it. Oxytone, paroxytone, proparoxytone. So we just keep adding prefixes as we go further down, almost like we have ultima and then penult and then antepenult. Add the prefix here. So for the circumflex, the ultima is the perispomenon, and the penult, properispomenon. Just add the pro. The grave only stands on the ultima, and we may call that baritone. So get used to using these terms. I know they seem pretty, wow, look at that. I mean, look at that word. I mean, yeah, these are great words. It actually helps in class if we can use these words rather freely. It will also help greatly if we'll be Zooming or something to be able to say, hey, is that word oxytonic? And then I can say yes or no. So, the position of the accent has to be learned as an important part of the word's spelling. Keep that in mind. The accent of a noun, an adjective, or participle, that accent is considered persistent. That means that the accent wants to stay wherever it is when it shows up in the nominative case. So wherever the accent is on the nominative, that accent wants to stay there on the nominative. And just for the kicks, let's go ahead and try and identify these words, call them by their names based on what accents they bear. So gnome, gnome. This is the words ultima. This is the words penult, and it has an accent on the penult. So it's not oxytone, but paroxytone. Very good. What about ha? That's a aspirate. Hados, hados. So it's got an acute on the ultima. This is the penult. This is the ultima. So an acute on the ultima is oxytonic. Very good. It's an oxytone. Anthropos, anthropos. So anthropos, we've got an acute on the ultima, penult, the antepenult. So it goes 3 dupes back. Antepenult, acute there. That's not just oxytone, that's not paroxytone, that's pro-paroxytone. Pro-paroxytonic. Man, it's a great word. Doron, doron. So the word for gift. We've got a circumflex. It goes up and then it goes down. Think of it like an acute omicron and then an omicron with a grave. So doron, doron. So ultima, penult, circumflex on the penult, not perispalmenon, but properispalmenon. All right. Now, the accent of verbs is recessive. So the accent of nouns, adjectives, and participles is persistent. It wants to stay. It wants to stay where it is here. The accent of verbs is recessive. So that means that the accent wants to be as far away from the ending, as far away from the ultima as the quantity, that is the length of the ultima, allows. And that's going to be a phrase that's going to that may fill you with fear. As much as the quantity of the ultima allows. Oh no, you'll be hearing that in your sleep. All right, check out some of these verbs. And yes, of course, exceptions abound. Greek is full of rule breakers. Paideosymi. So what? How would we classify that word? So it's got ultima, penult, antepenult. So it's got the ultima. It's got the acute on the antepenult. So that's going to be proparoxytone. Paideosyten. Paideosyten. Now, this word, paideosymi, the ultima, that iota, that is a short. That means that the accent, because it's verbs, it's recessive. It wants to get away from the ultima as much as possible. So that means that it can jump as far back as the antepenult, an acute on the antepenult. If the ultima is short, it can jump back acute on the antepenult because it wants to get as far away from the ending as possible. Now, if the ultima is long, like in paideosyten, then the acute can't go back that far. The acute, because of Greek rules, the acute is not allowed to jump back to the antepenult if the ultima is long. It is not allowed to do that. The long ultima drags that acute that would be on the antepenult to the penult. You don't like that. So this word is going to be very good, a paroxytone. And then, of course, exceptions abound. Well, shouldn't that I be long, and then you can't have a circumflex on a penult if the ultima is long? Yes, but exceptions abound. Greek is full of rule breakers. Paideosai. So that is the aorist active infinitive, and that is going to be not pro-perispalmenon, not perispalmenon, but pro-perispalmenon. Paideosai, pro-perispalmenon. All right, fantastic. So, how does the accent change under certain morphological conditions when we decline or we conjugate? We've already said when the ultima is what's the big decider. The ultima is the big decider. So as the accent on, say, nouns, adjectives, and participles wants to be on wherever it is on the nominative. But when you start declining and adding different endings, that changes sometimes the length or the quantity of the ultima, and that will change the accent. Oh boy! So when the ultima is short, the ultima, for whatever reason you're declining or conjugating, the ultima is short. If a word is accented on that short ultima, then it can have an acute, like the word hados, which is an oxytone. When the ultima is short, if a word is accented on a short penult, it's an acute, like logos, logos. When an ultima is short, if a word is accented on a long penult, well, then that's going to be a circumflex, like in doron, doron. And when the ultima is short, if a word is accented on the antepenult, that's got to be an acute, like in anthropos, anthropos. So we've got an oxytone, paroxytone, a proparispomenon, and a proparoxytone. Now, if the ultima is long, ludi and kipiont let the games begin. So if a word is accented on the long ultima, then it can be either an acute, like time, or a circumflex, like that famous hero Heracles. Heracles. But when an ultima is long, if a word is accented on the penult, it is an acute, like in gnome, gnome. So time, that's an oxytone. Heracles, that is going to be a parispomenon. And then gnome, gnome, that's going to be a paroxytone, paroxytone. Like I said, that was probably a lot thrown at you all at once. Luckily for you, you can rewind it as many times as you need to. So what I would recommend now is to move on to learning about the first and second declensions, and the adjectives, and the definite article. And then decline, nouns, and adjectives, decline nouns and adjectives with the definite article, and watch and see what the accents do under certain circumstances. Watch them in the wild. Then after you've declined a lot of these, you've practiced a lot of these, and you've tried them out, then come back, watch this video, go through these rules one more time. I bet it will make much more sense the second time around. All right, excellent. Arista, very well done. And moving on to declining nouns.